I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the disappearance and death of National Guardsman Matthew Johnson. And the key to the entire investigation may be the informant who was sleeping with his wife. Here's the story. Matthew Johnson, a 51-year-old Utah National Guard member, was reported missing by his wife, Jennifer Gledhill, on September 28, 2024. Gledhill claimed she had not seen Johnson since September 20th. Then, an informant told authorities that Gledhill had confessed to shooting Johnson in his sleep on September 21st. That informant was Jennifer's lover. He also told investigators Jennifer moved his body into a storage container, transported it in their minivan, and buried him in a shallow grave. Investigators discovered suspicious evidence in the couple's home, including a new mattress, bleach-stained walls, and reddish-brown stains. GPS data from Jennifer's phone also matched locations connected to Johnson's disappearance. But despite intense searches, Matthew's body has not been found. However, Jennifer was still arrested and charged with first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, desecration of a human body, and witness tampering. Meanwhile, Jennifer's parents were also arrested for obstruction of justice. Jennifer is in custody without bail as the case continues to unfold. Another case out of Utah involving a spouse and a wife accused of murdering her husband. Now, in this case, there's an informant, and the informant is playing a huge role. And the belief is that this informant is actually the defendant's lover. Let's take a listen to the Salt Lake County prosecutor.
On September 22nd, the defendant confessed to the informant that she shot Matthew in the master bedroom with a gun as he slept in the master bed. She confessed that she smashed Matthew's cell phone and hid his truck in a neighborhood near the house. She also confessed that she loaded Matthew's body into a rooftop storage container, slid him down the stairs, and loaded him into the back of her minivan. She confessed that she took Matthew's body north, dug a hole, and buried him in a shallow grave. And she confessed that she cleaned everything up.
So this is really important evidence. It's an alleged confession by the defendant, but it's not all the evidence. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. It's about everything else. What is the evidence against Jennifer Gledhill? What do they have? They've got this alleged confession, right? Which is evidence. Some would call it direct evidence. But what's the evidence that corroborates it, backs it up? What do they have? What do they have? Joining me, host of the True Crime Podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis, Gigi McKelvey is with us. And in Utah, retired police commander, host of the podcast Profiling Evil, Mike King. Thank you both for being here. I want to take a listen to a little bit more from the prosecutor talking about some of the physical evidence in this case.
On the early morning of September 21st, her phone data tracks her on that blue line all the way down to the bottom red dot, and where on September 30th, Matthew's truck was recovered. During a search of the defendant's and Matthew's residence, the police observed the following: a new mattress on the master bed, a smell of bleach in the house, fresh wipe marks from the cleaning on the wall behind the master bed, and blood found in the carpet underneath the master bed and on the slats of the master bed. On State's Exhibit 3 is a cutout from that rug. Now, the location of that blood stain is consistent with where Matthew would sleep. That is Blue Star imaging that confirmed that it's positive for human blood. And in addition, DNA analysis has confirmed that that is Matthew's blood.
Pretty compelling stuff. Gigi, this is a case, though, it really seems like it all begins with the informant/lover.
It does. And a lot of what he told investigators checked out forensically with what was found at the scene, such as her saying that she shot Matthew as he slept. And when they pulled that carpet up, the blood stain that had soaked all the way through was in the spot where his head would have been. On top of that, we have the, what do they call it? The thing that you put on top of the car, the storage unit that was on top of the car was seen in photos that she had on her phone prior to the murders. They eventually found that after a storm, floating in some water. Inside was his DNA. And we have also, before the murder, there is a video of the two of them arguing that she took that now shows there was some animosity between the two shortly before he was killed. It really seems like what we know, and not including what we don't know, there is a lot of evidence that supports the informant and also the fact that Jennifer killed her husband.
Mike King, I've been at Court TV a long time, before I started dyeing my hair silver. But looking at, I mean, I can't believe we're in Utah again. You know, for years, I didn't cover any cases in Utah. Now, I might as well set up a bureau in Utah. I might as well rent a room in your house, Mike. We have so many cases out there. So what are your thoughts about some of this physical evidence corroborating what the informant lover is saying? I mean, that's what you want when you're putting it together, right?
Yeah, you got it, Vinny. And you know me, I mean, I'm always about the behavioral evidence as well. And so I think if we backtrack, go back to March, she files for divorce. She then tries this attempt at using the protective order as a way to gain the property. But I found some things interesting with the idea that the court had decided and put a motion into place to absolve and get rid of that protective order 5 days before he disappears. So during that period of time, she still is inhabiting the house, even though the court has come back and said, hey, we don't believe that that was something worthy of a protective order. So we start seeing the animosity start to pile on top of each other. And we start seeing motive for anger and for the problems that are coming down the road. But then we get the testimony of the informant who says, yeah, even a couple of days before this event, she's cycling around in a 9mm weapon and saying, hey, this thing's ready and I'm ready. And so we see all of this kind of testing. We used to call it in the business trial ballooning, where they're sending out messages to kind of set the stage and do things. But then this thing becomes pretty disorganized once it happens, and she goes in and confesses to her lover.
Now, another one, we mentioned it already, that storage container, an important piece of evidence, but it's not just the container itself, it's what's found in that container. Let's listen.
Law enforcement did in fact locate that rooftop storage container with the assistance of the military in Davis County. It was located after a storm, and we believe it floated from where it was concealed by the defendant. If you go to State's Exhibit 8, State's Exhibit 8 is that same storage container. You can see that it was duct taped, but I want to note the specific design and the logo from that container. If we could go to 9. This is a screenshot recovered from the defendant's phone. And if we go to State's Exhibit 10, this is zoomed up close. You can see it's the same design, it's the same logo. We go to 11. This is Blue Star imaging from blood found, human blood found in that storage container. DNA analysis has determined that it's Matthew's blood.
Compelling stuff. I mean, how else? It seems there's very few explanations for blood inside of a container like that, Gigi.
Yeah, I said the only thing she didn't do is take a selfie at the crime scene afterwards, because she really did not cover her tracks. I mean, you have photos of the mattress topper in the house that was eventually found in a body of water. You have pillows. There is a, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. I mean, just everything that she got rid of, it seems like it came back in photos that she had on her computer. And it all just lines up with everything that she told the informant, who was also her boyfriend at the time of the murder. She really did not think this one out. by any stretch of the word.
Let's take a listen to now her defense attorney talking about that storage container.
The court had an opportunity to see what that container looked like. The possibility of Miss Gledhill being able to fit a full-grown man inside that container, to me, seems difficult and limited. And I do think it cuts against their argument of substantial evidence.
All right, Mike, what do you think? Because I think this will be an issue in the case, right? How do you get this man inside the container? We've covered the story of the woman and a man in a suitcase, so we know this stuff can happen. But what are your thoughts about her alone getting him inside that container? Her alone getting that container into a minivan?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen stories of people, Vinny, when they have a lot of adrenaline going, having superhuman strength to do a lot of things. But I think a couple of things that are important here, and you mentioned it, I would just say State's Exhibit A, Sarah Boone getting Torres in that suitcase and that causing his death. And that's a guy who's fighting, not a guy who's deceased. And that, we don't know whether he was even in one piece when he was put inside of that thing. But what we do know is that his body or parts of his body was inside of that thing at some point, even if it was a finger going inside and cutting himself on vacation, which would make her the most unlucky person on the planet.
Yeah, Gigi, what are your thoughts about how she's able, if, as prosecutors saying, she gets him into this container and then transports the container? It's going to take some level of adrenaline or some help here.
Yeah, I think probably more on the adrenaline side. It seems like she was determined to kill her husband. And also, once she had his body in the container, she pushed that down the stairs, so it made it easy to get him to that level floor where she then, which to me is the biggest mystery, how do you lift dead weight into a minivan? But if she didn't have help, I think that adrenaline was still very much pumping and allowed her to do what she did. And we see this a lot in cases where someone is very, very much smaller than their victim, and they're able to almost have this superhuman strength in the moment that allows them to do these things. And, I always think of Jodi Arias and how the size difference between her and Travis Alexander, you would not look at her and think she would be capable of the physical force necessary to do what she did. But when these women get into a homicidal mode, it's like they become superwoman and can lift this dead weight just purely out of adrenaline and also probably a bit of panic to get rid of that body as quickly as they can.
All right, guests are staying with us. Coming up next, were Jennifer Gledhill's parents involved?
Just days after that temporary protective order was removed, she arranged for the children to stay at her parents' during the evening that Matthew was killed.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cimentelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cimentelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The Celebrity Stylist Murder Trial, weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
The state believes the defendant was very calculating in her crimes. Just days after that temporary protective order was removed, she arranged for the children to stay at her parents' during the evening that Matthew was killed. And she asked her parents to keep the children home at their house for another day, presumably while she was cleaning up the crime and disposing of Matthew's body.
So Jennifer Gledhill is accused of the murder, but her parents now are facing charges as well. Take a look. Her father, Thomas Ray Gledhill, 3 counts of obstruction of justice. Her mother, Rosalie Christensen Gledhill, 4 counts of obstruction of justice. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Were Jennifer Gledhill's parents involved? And if so, to what extent? Joining me, psychotherapist, author, and host of Talking Live and the Bite-Sized Podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, and still with us, retired police commander Mike King. All right, Dr. Robbie, I want to read for you from the affidavit of probable cause for her mother. Rosalie Gledhill assisted in purchasing a new mattress for the suspect. Rosalie Gledhill told police she was at her daughter's home on the night of September 24th to pick up clothing and stated she was there for less than an hour. Witnesses who lived nearby stated they had observed Rosalie Gledhill in the home cleaning. Witnesses stated she was there for over 5 hours. Rosalie's cell phone was seized, but the phone had been reset and information was lost. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, tough spot for a mom if you get a call. You know, if prosecutors, what they're saying is right here, it would seem that mom maybe got a call, big trouble here. Tell us, what goes through the mind of a mother if you get a call from your daughter who has just committed, allegedly, right, the ultimate crime, and she needs help cleaning up, literally cleaning up the mess?
Well, a mother that had morals would say, I want to do anything I can to protect you, will get you a great lawyer, but to actually get involved in covering up a crime, as I don't know if you can hear the sirens in the background, that's just not okay. And it's a form of enabling. Now, we don't know what the daughter shared with her mother about the state of her marriage and whether Rosalie somehow felt sorry for Jennifer and felt that Jennifer was just trying to survive. We don't know what stories went back and forth. We don't know the history of how the mother might have enabled her daughter to feel entitled to do whatever she wanted because the mother would have her back. Clearly, that would be self-destructive. But it's very dangerous and very suspect. I think somebody who was of higher moral ground would want to protect their daughter, but would do it in a legal way. Don't say anything, don't touch anything. We'll get you a lawyer and we'll take things from there.
Okay, Mike, I want to read for you the affidavit of probable cause for the father. On September 26, 2024, the suspect messaged Thomas Gledhill that the mattress be delivered to his address. The suspect's cell phone message showed she would pick up the mattress from Thomas. Thomas denied cleaning his daughter's house on the night of September 24th. Witnesses stated they saw Thomas at his daughter's house and that he was cleaning. Data from the suspect's cell phone showed on the afternoon the suspect was north of Salt Lake County. The suspect's cell phone showed she had called Thomas Gledhill and then promptly the phone was shut off. Immediately after the phone was turned on, a call was made to Thomas Gledhill. During the time up north, the only calls made by the suspect were to Thomas. What are your thoughts about how this potentially went down and when the father gets involved here if these allegations are true?
If I could, I'd like to put it in two buckets. The first bucket being what was going on at the time of the murder, or I feel pretty comfortable saying the murder. And that was that Dad later says to law enforcement, hey, I was only there for an hour, but he makes this admission where he says, I didn't go in where the incident happened. So he clearly knows that there's something going on there. And like Dr. Ludlow said, they weren't making calls to law enforcement and saying, hey, let's get the cops involved and let's fix this and we're going to get you help. What it appears is that they went along with the idea of, hey, it may not be a good idea to send the new mattress to your house, send it to ours, we'll deliver it over. That testimony that they were there until 11 o'clock at night or 5 hours, to me, Vinny, is really big because it's so opposite of the idea of we were only there for an hour. That's really troubling. But when you start talking about the cell phone and the fact that moments before that phone goes off, she makes a phone call to Dad, that's really kind of interesting, but not that big a deal, I guess. But then the phone goes dead. But when it gets turned on and reactivated, it's almost like calling in and reporting back on mission accomplished. And that's the part that's most troubling to me. And I think something that's going to really be difficult for them to get over.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, again, I think about the dynamic. Could you imagine what that was like at the moment if they're all in the house cleaning up blood and scurrying around
and learning that our child, who's not a child, she's obviously a grown woman, but your child is always your child, is in the middle of all this and what it does to the relationships. And now everyone is charged. Do you think there's the potential for blame going around? Do you think they stick together to the end of all this?
You know, it's hard to know. A parent's love is very strong, and very often parents would do anything to save a child. But in this case, are we seeing a dynamic where the parents sent Jennifer the message, no matter what you do, even if it's wrong, we will back you. We will help you. Maybe Jennifer's been running the show with her parents for a very long time, where she's been telling them what to do and how she needs their help. Also, Jennifer could have told them a very manipulative story. She could have said, I was in a very abusive relationship. It was either me or my husband. He was violent. He was volatile. I didn't mean it. And now I'm scared. And the parents get seduced into that story like they probably have been seduced by her many times before. And they just go into an automatic mode where they're all in it together.
Yeah, and I think about the kids, right? The kids, dad is dead, mom locked up, grandma and grandpa in trouble. Like, their whole world is being taken away from them. That's not fair. Okay, up next, we're going to continue our investigation and ask the question, where is Matthew Johnson? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the disappearance of National Guardsman Matthew Johnson. This is now a murder case, and Matthew's wife has been accused after an informant provided key information. An informant who was sleeping with Matthew's wife. Here's the story.
Jennifer Gledhill was arrested in September of 2024 after investigators uncovered evidence linking her to the disappearance and presumed murder of her husband, Matthew Johnson, a Utah National Guard member. Authorities were tipped off by an informant, allegedly Gledhill's lover, who claimed she confessed to shooting Johnson in his sleep on September 21st. Jennifer allegedly hid his body in a rooftop storage container before transporting and burying it. A search of the couple's home revealed a newly purchased mattress, reddish-brown stains, and bleach-stained walls. GPS data from Jennifer's phone further placed her at key locations tied to Johnson's disappearance. Despite extensive searches, his body remains missing. Jennifer has been charged with first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, desecration of a human body, and witness tampering. She was denied bail due to being deemed a danger to the community. Her parents, meanwhile, were also arrested for allegedly helping cover up the crime.
And we've been talking about a lot of the evidence in this case, but there is some crucial evidence that is missing, that prosecutors don't have, that investigators have not recovered. Let's take a listen.
The mattress is still missing. The gun is still missing. The very gun that we have video of her handling, and the same gun she showed the informant just days before the murder. The search for Matthew Johnson's body is ongoing, and his family just wants to bring Matthew home. And they are concerned that if the defendant is released, she will continue to obstruct those efforts.
And that brings us to the next question in our investigation, and this is such an important one, especially for the family. Where is Matthew Johnson? Joining me, host of the true crime podcast, Pretty Lies and Alibis. Make sure you download it after the show tonight. Gigi McKelvey is with us. And in Utah, retired police commander and host of the podcast Profiling Evil, which you also need to take a listen to after the program, Mike King is with us. I want you to take a listen to more from the Salt Lake County prosecutor. talking about some phone activity and where they believe this suspect was going and where she was headed.
This is the mapping of the defendant's phone on September 22nd. It shows her traveling up north. It also, during that time, she also turned her phone off for 2.5 hours. There's also videos that confirm that videos at different locations that confirm she's up north during this time. That GPS phone data, that tracking map that we showed on the previous exhibit, put the defendant at a specific location. A location that, upon further investigation, it turns out the defendant discarded even more evidence. Law enforcement located the master bed foam mattress and pillows which were wrapped up in a rug from the residence.
So, Gigi, as they track this phone activity and the direction it's going, it seems to fit into this timeline. And this, I believe prosecutors will argue, is the trip that she takes to get rid of evidence.
Yeah, it seems that way. And for her phone to be off for a couple of hours, it kind of fits that timeline of what she told her lover, which was she buried him in a shallow grave. So it wouldn't take a whole lot of time to dig a shallow grave. And it really is the million-dollar question, because she didn't do a whole lot right after she killed him as far as covering her tracks. But when she chose the location to bury Matthew's body, clearly she knew what she was doing, because, as you know, we have no clue as of right now where his body is.
Mike King, you're in Utah. You know the land. You know the geography, the topography of Utah. What surprised me here, and I saw the image of the storage unit floating, it looked like it was in a marsh. It looked more like I was covering a Florida case than a Utah case. What can you tell us?
Well, first thing is I think about Harmony Montgomery, Vinnie, and the fact that we know she was disposed of somewhere in a marsh north of Boston, Massachusetts. Marshes are horrible places to look for a body, especially if that body has somehow been separated from the container that it was in. And so I think that container becomes incredibly important in this thing. And I hope that law enforcement, and I would suspect they have, that they carefully examine that tote to determine how that thing opened up. If his body was still inside of it when it was buried out there or submerged out there, then somehow that thing was opened, whether it was because the elements, and again, we've gone through a pretty rough winter here. It's been icy. The ice can move things around, but they already found this thing back before even hunting season started in Utah out there on the Duck Marsh. So that tells me that it was either the result of animal depredation, wolves and fox and coyotes and other things tearing at that thing. And I think there would be physical evidence to support that could help them determine why that separation occurred. Or the body was dumped somewhere else, maybe in pieces, and that's a horrible thing to think of, or in whole somewhere, and then the toad itself was disposed of in a different location. So there are not things like tidal influenced waters out there on that marsh. It's all water that's influenced by a couple of water aquifers and the Great Salt Lake. So there's not really a lot of movement outside of the water flowing into the marshes from the mountains. And so it's going to be going one direction for the most part, unless the winds were heavy and pushed it around. So all of that comes into play in these dang investigations. And when you start looking at them, you go down 15 different rabbit holes trying to solve that single little mystery. But if they found a claw mark or a tooth mark on that, that could give them a whole lot of direction onto whether they're looking there or maybe a little further away.
Now, Gigi brought up a big point here, Mike, about the phone being turned off. And I understand you've put together some calculation on how far she could have traveled in that time with the phone off?
Yeah, you know, when we look at that image that the prosecutor showed, or this one here, the Wasatch Mountain Range there, the cell tower coverage is incredibly good because they can get them way high on those mountains. And so if those phone pings were triangulated off of cell towers, they're going to be pretty accurate. If it's actually data coming off of the mobile device, the internal GPS of it, they're going to be even better. But what it tells us is when she turns off the phone, we know that there are 150 minutes that need to be accounted for. Think about if you were to jump in your car, Vinnie, and drive for an hour and 15 minutes. Even from Atlanta, you could get on awfully long ways. Now, take that and build it outward, And that image that I was showing on the map there is the area where there are accessible roads where she could get within that period of time and make it back for that ping. So she could make it to the Utah-Idaho border, and she could make it clear out to the salt flats in the Bonneville Raceway.
Now, I do have to disagree with you, Mike. It depends upon the time of day in Atlanta with the traffic and how far you could actually get in an hour.
All right, I yield.
Sometimes it might be, 5 miles. Let's take a listen, because there's two sides to every story, obviously. Let's take a listen to the defense attorney, and this might give us an indication of where they may be going in this case.
Mr. Johnson is a highly trained Special Forces officer with several tours of combat under his belt and is equipped with abilities your standard citizen simply does not have. These abilities and experiences give multiple explanations and possibilities that have nothing to do with Ms. Gledhill as it relates to his disappearance.
Gigi, sounds to me like they may argue that this guy, National Guardsman, he's an outdoorsman, and he's just checking out and just left.
I mean, it doesn't make sense with everything we've learned about Matthew being in the National Guard for quite some time. Never had any problems with him not showing up. And the biggest thing is you have Jennifer allegedly confessing to her lover what she did to him. The forensic evidence in the house matches everything the informant has told law enforcement. I think it's a stretch, but that's what defense attorneys do. They try to put that little shred of doubt, especially with no body. It makes it a little easier to say, hey, maybe he just checked out, but everything else really just points to the fact that something really violent happened in that master bedroom. And we have the storage container with his blood in it, cell phone turned off, mom and dad at the house for 5 hours, buying new mattresses. It's going to be a hard sell if this goes to a jury. Yeah, and there's 3 huge reasons why I believe he didn't just leave, and those are the children that we saw in that photo. Big thank you to Mike King, Profiling Evil podcast. Thank you so much for your help. Gigi's going to stick around. Still to come, what do we know about Jennifer Gledhill's lover?
The defendant apologizes for telling the informant about what happened. She tells him to not think of her as a monster and to remember her who she was before she opened her mouth.
Race was in the undercurrent of this case from the beginning.
They saw this as a chance to really put the system on trial.
This stuff about playing a race card is preposterous.
The race factor was huge. This is right after Rodney King.
The racial division was so great that people saw the facts differently.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? A Court TV original series. New episode Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
The defendant told the informant that she would kill herself before spending her life in prison, or that she would flee the state with her children.
Prosecutor there referencing the informant, which was really the key to this entire case. But the informant isn't just a random informant. It is the defendant's lover. Let's take a listen to get some more information about what this lover/informant was telling investigators.
Right before the defendant reported Matthew missing, the informant recorded a phone call with the defendant. And rather than playing it here, I just want to summarize some points and what is recorded on that recording. In the phone call, the defendant apologizes for telling the informant about what happened. She tells him to not think of her as a monster and to remember her who she was before she opened her mouth. And the informant tells the defendant that he was frightened by what she had told him. And then the informant, and I quote, says to her, hypothetically, if the roles were reversed and I did something to someone and I told you that I carried it out, like, you would be shocked and scared, wouldn't you? And the defendant responds, quoting, well, not if I deserved it. I always preached that I was like the Queen of Hearts in my past lives because I'm like off with their heads. I'm like, if we could just round up the scum of this earth and put them on an island or just kill them all, I could shipshape this country back into a good place. Now then, even in that phone call, she starts claiming that this is just a hypothetical situation. However, she tells, and I quote the informant, "I think that the fact that you got scared of me, that part, it broke my heart, because I was like, wow, if you think I could even hurt a fly, like he's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't Matt anymore."
Wow. Let's get to the next question in our investigation, and it really focuses on these two and their relationship. What do we know about Jennifer Gledhill's lover, the so-called informant in this case? Still with me, podcast host Gigi McKelvey, and joining me, psychotherapist, author, and host of Talking Live and the Bite Size podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Dr. Robbie, what did you think of what the suspect, the defendant, was saying in that phone call?
It was pretty scary. Basically, Jennifer was describing her murderous rage that she had towards people she felt were scum. There was no empathy there. It was just she decided somebody didn't have a right to live, and off with their head. So she's basically describing how she sees the world, how she sees herself in relation to other people. And so I would call this an entitled homicide. She felt entitled to kill off people she decided weren't worthy, weren't human, or that she just didn't like. And she's revealing this to this man, the informant, and then worried that she might frighten him, and was worried that someone would see her differently. So she wants to be viewed in a particular way, but her core is so scary. How can that be done? How can the two images live together side by side and not worry somebody? I don't think that's possible.
Gigi, it really seems like this phone call became the deal breaker in this relationship, because when we look at the timing of everything, like, she makes the call before anyone knows he's missing or anything is going on there, but his call to investigators also precedes any of his alleged involvement. Like, they didn't really know about him. He called them, he reached out.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I guess maybe in her mind, she thought she would tell her lover, hey, I've got rid of my husband, we can be together. And it had the opposite effect. It scared the guy to death. And I think that goes to show you her mindset, and the fact that she tried to pass it off in the recorded phone call as a hypothetical situation after she very much in detail described the murder and what she did afterwards to dispose of the evidence, including his body. It shows that she knew. She rattled this guy. And to say it was a hypothetical, I mean, I really was like, is that what you're saying? That confession didn't mean anything. I was just seeing what you would think. This guy had to be terrified. I do know that they started seeing each other around July of last year in 2024 and met through their kids, who obviously had some sort of a connection, whether it be sports or school. And so not a really long-lasting relationship before the murder, just a couple of months. I guess in her mind, she thought once he was gone, they would just live happily ever after, and he would just disregard the fact that she very brutally told him how she murdered her husband and disposed of him.
So, Dr. Robbie, the lover becomes the informant, calls investigators, and really, unravels this whole case for them. Him making that call, what does it tell us about him? What does it tell us about their relationship?
Well, I think what we're seeing about the informant, he's a kind of a decent guy, and he also didn't want to be incriminated in this crime, and probably was really, really frightened, did not assess. Sometimes when people are beautiful on the outside, we misjudge and we think they can't be bad, can't be murderous. And so this must have been a shock, and it sounded like he wanted to get ahead of it. He was frightened by her, scared and unnerved that this is something that happened to somebody he was involved with. He did not want to be victimized by her, and he didn't want to be implicated by her. And at this point, any of those scenarios could have happened. So his fear served him well, and he did the right thing.
And Gigi, I mean, this becomes really what the entire foundation of the case, right? Are these phone calls, this alleged confession that leads to everything else? And it makes you wonder, you know, why? Why is she doing this? Like, it's the first call that she made. And I wonder if she thought she really did have a future with this man, or she was venting. It's quite unusual, because in most of the cases that we cover, right, love triangle, usually everyone's kind of in on it a little bit. But here, it doesn't seem like he's a part of this at all, unless this is some sort of deflection, and that's where the defense will go in the case.
Yeah, I don't think it's a deflection. I think law enforcement probably looked at his phone very well and saw where he was, and maybe some past communications that showed no indication prior to the murder she was planning on doing that. This poor guy, I mean, I guess maybe in her mind she thought, I'm going to tell him, he's going to be so happy we can be together. But he saw clearly he was having an affair with a homicidal maniac who probably didn't bat an eye when she talked about the way she murdered her husband as he slept in the bed and then disposed of his body in a way clearly we still don't know how or where. Hopefully before this goes to trial, if it does, if she doesn't plead out, they'll find his body, at least for the family. But Vinnie, the evidence in this case is so overwhelming. I don't know that they would need his body for a successful prosecution. That bond hearing the other day, I think if you had a jury there, it would have been very easy to convict her on what little came out. And there are certainly things we don't know yet that the prosecution is keeping under wraps at this time.
Yeah, the confession and the blood really put those pieces together. Some no-body cases, if you don't have any of that evidence, becomes very problematic. Dr. Robbie, here's a question I have about the mindset of this defendant. What are your thoughts about cause and effect here, if the prosecution's theory is correct, about what motivates the murder? Is this something that would have happened regardless of the affair, or does the affair cause her to want to do something like this?
I think in this case, the affair was a byproduct of Jennifer just wanting something different. And she talks about her other life and Queen of Hearts, and she talks about the desire to murder somebody with a murderous pride. She liked this aspect of herself, that she was willing to kill people who didn't serve her needs, who were scum, who weren't ideal. And perhaps she was showing off to this lover, look at what I'm capable of doing. I'm just testing it out, the what if theory. But, you know, Jennifer seemed to like herself and like her ability to be able to make things happen and get rid of people she didn't want in her life. And so she assumed and played it wrong that this guy would feel the way she felt about herself.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, Gigi McKelvey, thank you both so much. Appreciate it. You know, I'll never understand the deadly love triangle cases we cover. They are senseless crimes. They usually get caught quickly because you can't trust a liar or cheater to keep quiet. But the biggest tragedy is always the innocent children stuck in the middle who lose one parent to murder and another to incarceration. These killers ruin many lives. Now it'll be up to a jury to tell us if Jennifer Gledhill is one of these killers. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for the answers as the investigation continues.